On October 28, 2023, the world woke up to the news that one of the most beloved sitcom actors in television history was found face down in his hot tub. Matthew Perry. You might remember him as Chandler Bing.
Thieves! Check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out.
Oh, Soap Opera Digest!
He was 54 years old. The initial assumption was simple: a troubled man, a long battle with addiction, a tragic but unsurprising end. But the investigation that followed pulled at a thread that unraveled something far bigger than one man's overdose. Behind that body, in that hot tub, was a supply chain so elaborate, so layered, that it involved two doctors, a middleman, a personal assistant, and at its center, a woman who operated out of a North Hollywood apartment with a gold money counting machine and a clientele list that read like a Hollywood afterparty. This is the story of the ketamine network that pervades Hollywood and the kingpin that sits atop it. Except in this case, it's a queen, the Ketamine Queen. This is the story of Jasveen Sangha. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest stories from around South Asia. I'm your host Aryan.
And I'm Ishwarya.
And the case that I have for you today is the death of a heartthrob, a familiar face for billions of people around the world that broke all of our hearts. Ishwarya, I grew up watching this famous or infamous show, as you know, depending whether you're a fan or a hater, called Friends.
You're such a huge Friends fan. I think more so when we were younger, back in our school years. Aryan is the reason that I first watched Friends. And Matthew Perry's death, I don't know. Firstly, because we got to see so much of his addiction play out on screen as well. We knew the story of his life. The Friends reunion came, and there were hints of someone who had pulled himself back up and someone who was recovering. And then came the news of the death. And there are some deaths where you wake up and you read the news and now you remember where you were when you read the news. To me, Kobe Bryant's death was that. I still remember reading it in our college dorm room. And Matthew Perry's death was that, where I remember where I was and I woke up and I said, no way.
Yeah.
So it's just so sad.
You know, Friends was the first show I ever watched. And it's one of those shows that transports you in a different universe, right? You have bought into a narrative of 5 friends and their life and whatnot. 6 friends, I think. And when that show ended, when I stopped watching it, of course, it had ended years before I ever watched it. But when the final episode I watched, I remember being in the airport. I think it was in Vietnam. I was a kid on a family trip, and I felt lost.
Yeah.
It was the first time I finished watching a show, and I was like,
there is a void left in your life.
There was
almost.
I can't explain how empty I felt for 3 days. These friends were my friends.
Yeah.
For a kid, these were like my imagine. Like I was so bought into their life, and that's ending. It's like losing a pet. I really can't explain that sentiment. And for most people, Chandler Bing was a character that they loved more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's only when I grew up I realized that even in the show, as you said, he was dealing with the addictions actively. And so there was one season where he was, I think, posted in Idaho or something for his job. And he was, apart from all the friends, all his scenes were shot separately. And I always felt that was such a weird plot point. You know, why would you take Chandler away? And it was because he was in rehab, so they had to shoot his bit separately. He was not in New York or LA or wherever the show was being shot.
I heard him talking about the fact that there are seasons in there he doesn't remember.
Wow.
And he watches them again and goes, wow, like, who am I in this? I don't remember shooting this.
And so when his death was announced, of course, that void was again tapped into. But I just thought it was either he killed himself or it was an overdose. But in the months following it, the investigation into his death revealed a network way bigger than just Matthew Perry and way more insidious that actually contributed to his death. His death wasn't him taking his life, but I would say murder.
And Adnan, I think that's what I don't know. I don't know the depths and tentacles of this story and how wide it pervades. And a lot of our audience may not know that. So let's get into it.
In March 2024, DEA agents and LAPD officers execute a search warrant on an apartment in a mid-rise complex in North Hollywood. The unit belongs to a 40-year-old woman with an MBA from a London business school and 12,000 Instagram followers. But what they find inside does not match the Instagram. 79 vials of liquid ketamine lined up in rows, thousands of pressed methamphetamine pills, MDMA tablets, counterfeit Xanax, baggies of powdered ketamine and cocaine, a gold money counting machine, a wireless signal detector, a hidden camera detector, drug packaging materials, and $5,000 in cash. This wasn't a user's apartment. This was a warehouse with a bed in it. The woman who runs this operation has been at it for at least 5 years, the DEA concluded, and had been using the app Signal for encrypted communications, marketing herself to what prosecutors describe as a high-profile Hollywood clientele. Her customers had a name for her, not one that prosecutors invented for the indictment, a name her own clients used. They call her the Ketamine Queen. But the raid is not the beginning of the story, it is closer to the end. To understand how a Punjabi-origin woman from an affluent London family, raised in Calabasas with an MBA, ended up running a stash house with a gold money counter and a hidden camera detector, you have to go back further. To East London, to a high school yearbook quote, to a 33-year-old personal trainer who died in 2019 and whose death nobody cared enough to investigate. And to the moment when one of the biggest television stars on the planet walked into the supply chain of a woman who had already been told by a dead man's sister that her product killed people. So first I want to take you to East London, a different era, a different continent. Budh Singh and Harbhajan Singh leave Punjab for England and do what millions of South Asian immigrants have done across the diaspora. They build. In their case, they build a fashion retail empire, supplying luxury department stores across East London, the kind of first-generation grind that transforms a family's trajectory in a single lifetime. Their son, Nilam Singh, becomes an entrepreneur. He marries Baljit Singh Chokar. They have a daughter named Jasveen. She is born in London on July 22nd, 1983. So far, this is a story you've heard 100 times on this podcast. Immigrant family, hard work, and prosperity. But then the family moves. After Baljit remarries, they leave London for Calabasas, California. Now, if you know your American geography or American pop culture, Calabasas is the zip code of the Kardashians. It is one of the wealthiest suburbs in the United States, and it sits right at the doorstep of the entertainment industry. Jasveen Sangha grows up in Calabasas. She graduates from Calabasas High School in 2001. And I want you to pay attention to a small detail here, because it is going to haunt this entire story. Her senior yearbook has a quote beside her photo. Every high schooler picks one, right? I remember picking the silly one about the hallway in my school not having CCTV cameras. But something that most kids think sounds cool wasn't the case for what Jasveen chose. What she chose read as follows, quote, "It isn't what they say about you, it's what they whisper," end quote. At 17, that might have sounded edgy. At 42, sitting in a federal courtroom with 5 felony charges and 2 dead customers, it reads like an epitaph she wrote for herself 2 decades too early. Now, after high school, she goes on to UC Irvine for a bachelor's in social sciences, then to Hult International Business School in London for an MBA. Then she opens a nail bar called Stiletto in Studio City, LA. On Instagram, she curates a careful image. Art, travel, caviar, afternoon tea, London to LA and back. 12,000 followers amass. The whole aesthetic of a woman who wants you to believe her life is tasteful, international, and effortless. Now, Aishwarya, you perhaps can comment better than most experts on this. What do you make of a woman like this who's grown up in Calabasas? Can you paint the picture of what it might be like to grow up in Calabasas? Because it's not like growing up in any normal human settlement.
It's not. And I, unfortunately, am a little removed from the world of the Kardashians. I think my closest exposure to something like this comes either in the form of true crime stories like the O.J. Simpson one, which I like really, really dove deep into, which is the same zip code, same area, same circle of people, or something like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, which we watched together.
Don't say
We're
that
going to
publicly.
tell the world that he watched and he loved it. And
It was COVID. I was going through a trash phase.
that's it. But I think someone to grow up in that environment, especially a young girl, I can imagine a life of so much affluence
Yeah.
that it's not normal, so much comparison perhaps,
Yes.
so much insecurity. I guess I'm thinking of what growing up as a child and something like this for me would be like, what it would do to me. It's not humble. There is comparison in terms of the way people look. I've had it been described to me that people just walking down streets in LA looking at these perfectly sculpted human beings.
Oh, Aishwarya, LA.
It must do something to
LA
your-
is one thing. I remember like 5 years ago, I was in Beverly Hills for something. I thought I was in a zoo. And not, it's a little derogatory, but not very. I mean, it just meant it was alien to me. Everybody looked so different from the normal humans that we interact with. It was like Instagram IRL, right? Everybody had some facial surgery done, some kind of implants. And I was like, this is insane. Now, if you grow up in that, and that's why I'm pointing it out for all of you, this girl, Jasveen, she grew up affluent. So what she is comparing herself to are more affluent people.
Right, exactly.
And so the game she is playing is very different from the games we play in life.
Right.
She is not playing the game to become a millionaire. She comes from a multi-million-dollar family. Her competition is status of the likes of Kardashian, of the celebrities she's grown up around. And when you're running a nail studio, you don't have that kind of prestige.
You don't.
And so what she ends up doing next is not in the pursuit of money, but in the pursuit of connections. From 2019 onward, prosecutors note that Jasveen Sangha held no legitimate employment. Her nail bar faded, the MBA was collecting dust, and what replaced them is a North Hollywood apartment in a mid-rise complex that functioned as a stash house. Jasveen stores, packages and distributes ketamine, methamphetamine and whatever else her clientele wants. Now, ketamine is this drug that is essentially a horse tranquilizer. It has therapeutic uses when administered properly, but it's a very potent drug. And methamphetamine, we all know, is an upper of sorts. It's, it's used in, the Nazis used it in war to keep the soldiers going. But ketamine is a very new drug and has modern applications and is becoming really prominent. So it's a very different kind of drug. It is a psychotropic substance. It is a horse tranquilizer. And it can have, deleterious effects if used improperly. Like I said, the vials and vials of drugs found in an apartment were not for financial motivation. Prosecutors will later frame her motivation with a line that could serve as the tagline of her entire biography. She dealt, quote, not because of financial deprivation, but for greed, glamour, and access. Her grandparents built an empire so their descendants would never have to hustle. But their granddaughter hustled anyway because of what it brought her. Not money, but entry into rooms at a Hult MBA and a nail studio could never open. And here is a detail that tells you everything about the kind of person she ends up becoming. After Matthew Perry died, after the man she supplied ketamine to has been found face down in his hot tub, Jasveen Sangha does not go quiet. She does not lie low. She travels to Japan. She travels to Mexico. She posts photos of caviar and afternoon tea from these places. She throws herself a 40th birthday party at a Koreatown lounge in LA called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And in July 2024, weeks before a federal grand jury hands down her indictment, she posts a photo of a bracelet with mushroom charms. And the caption reads, "Pulling out old raver candy, #rave to the grave." A man was dead. An investigation was closing in, and the Ketamine Queen is hashtagging rave to the grave. You cannot make this up. But before Matthew Perry, before this famous guy, there was a non-famous guy, an ordinary Joe by the name of Cody McLaury. And the reason you've never heard of Cody McLaury is the reason that this case matters beyond the celebrity headline. Cody was 33. He lived in LA. And he was trying to make it as a personal trainer. In August 2019, he bought 4 vials of ketamine from Jasveen, paid through Venmo. The transaction sitting in his phone records alongside whatever else he paid for that week, indistinguishable from a dinner split or a gym membership. Hours later, friends who hadn't heard from him went to his apartment. and they found him on his bed, unresponsive. Cody was declared dead on arrival of the ambulance. The autopsy listed the cause as acute ketamine toxicity alongside heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine. Cody McLaury's death did not make the news. Not one outlet. There was no investigation into his supplier, no press conference, no federal probe. There was a funeral, a toxicology report, and a family left to make sense of a death that the system had already decided did not warrant further attention. And then sometime later, the police returned Cody's phone to his sister Kimberly. She unlocked it, she scrolled through his messages, and she found the conversation that would, 5 years later, become the moral center of a federal sentencing hearing. The texts between Cody and Sangha were transactional. How much ketamine is available, what it costs, the mechanics of a drug deal that ended her brother's life, preserved in the same device he used to close it. Kimberly read through them, understanding for the first time exactly who sold her brother the drug that killed him. And then she did something that requires a composure most people in the wreckage of grief do not possess. She opened the chat and from her dead brother's phone typed, quote, "Just so you know, the ketamine that you sold my brother was listed as his cause of death." End quote. On the other line, there was no response, not a word. Not even the performative condolence that would cost nothing to send. Maybe Jasveen didn't see the text. Maybe Jasveen saw it, felt guilty, and didn't respond. Kimberly later told CNN, "I just assumed that she did not care." And Kimberly was right. But the truth was worse than just indifference. Because what Sangha did next, according to prosecutors, is open Google and type, quote, "Can ketamine be listed as a cause of death?" And she gets her answer. It can. It just had been. On the death certificate of a man whose vials she had filled. And Jasveen, armed with the knowledge that her product had killed a human being, stopped selling her product. That's not true. She kept selling. She kept selling for 4 more years. She saw that she killed somebody. And she decided, hell, why not continue? Now here's the part that's a little baffling in hindsight. Cody McLaury's death would not be investigated until agents raided Sangha's apartment 5 years later in connection with Perry's overdose and found evidence linking her to both men. US Attorney Martin Estrada was asked by ABC News whether McLaury's death would ever have been examined if Perry had not died. His answer? It's certainly possible that it would not have been. Sit with that for a second. A 33-year-old man dies from drugs sold by a woman who goes on to sell the same drugs to one of the most famous actors in America, and nobody looks into it until the famous person died. Is it possible that Matthew Perry would have been alive had Cody's death been investigated? We'll never know. Now, if you grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, or hell, even the 2010s or 20s, you know Matthew Perry. You might not know the name immediately, but you do know Chandler Bing. The sarcastic guy from Friends, the one who deflected every genuine emotion with a joke, the one who made you laugh so hard you forgot that the character was, underneath all the wit, deeply unhappy. And that was not entirely acting. Perry spent his adult life fighting an addiction so severe, he checked into rehab 15 times, spent $9 million trying to get clean, and nearly died when opioid abuse perforated his gastrointestinal tract and put him in a coma for 2 weeks at the age of 49. In 2022, he published a memoir called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. And if you haven't read it, you should, because it is one of the most brutally honest accounts of addiction ever written by someone that famous. He wrote that he did not want to be remembered for friends. He wanted to be remembered for helping people who struggled with the same disease. And by late 2023, the ketamine therapy his doctor had legally prescribed and was administering him was working. But Perry wanted more than the prescribed dose. And that want of more, is where that chain of addiction began.
I don't know, someone who doesn't know a lot about drugs, even in their scientific pharmaceutical sense, speaking to someone who does and is deeply interested in, I'm not in that sense, in the nerdy, geeky sense of the word. But I want to know, the ketamine that's being administered to him by a doctor, it's happening legally since it's being done by a doctor, I'm guessing. Is it then being prescribed for a disease that he's suffering, or is it part of a de-addiction program? What is it?
Two things. There are multiple use cases of ketamine that have been studied. Some that are FDA approved and some that are not. Okay, so FDA approved means it can legally be done without any issues as long as you qualify. And then there's the gray area where it's not legal but not illegal, which also some doctors do, especially in places like LA and these, rather liberal places where people want to have experimental therapies. His particular thing with ketamine was both therapeutic, and I'm guessing the therapy was based on his history of addiction. And ketamine under the correct provision can help you get over addiction and trauma. And there is a vast literature emerging of ketamine therapy, ibogaine therapy, psilocybin therapy. In de-addiction.
So what's happening here is that he's getting addicted to what he's using to de-addict.
Yeah.
So is that a doctor fault, or is that a drug fault that can be traced back to Jasveen?
That is...
or both?
It's a combination. It's somebody who has an addictive personality.
Yeah.
It is somebody who then has access to those
Right.
beside doctors. And as you'll see, Matthew Perry went from legal to semi-legal to illegal. Right? Before Jasveen, there were actual doctors facilitating this. So you'll
That's
learn.
so unfortunate to me that this is a man who has de-addicted.
Yeah.
He's walked the path.
Yeah.
And it's his de-addiction therapy where something goes wrong
Yeah.
and he finds himself right back in it.
Yeah.
That is so sad to me.
Now, Aishwarya's question is pertinent because how did this legal therapy enter the fringes of illegality? Let me walk you through exactly how ketamine reached Matthew Perry on the day he died, because it is not a simple transaction. It is a relay, and every link had a chance to stop it and chose not to. Perry's legitimate doctor administered ketamine infusion at controlled doses, legal, supervised, and it worked. But Perry wanted more. That want led him first to Dr. Salvador Plasencia, a 44-year-old Santa Monica physician known in certain circles as Dr. P. Dr. P sold Perry vials of ketamine directly, despite knowing about Perry's well-documented addiction history, despite knowing that the person actually injecting the drug was not a medical professional, but Kenneth Iwamasa, Perry's 61-year-old live-in personal assistant, a man with zero medical training, putting a needle into one of the most famous actors in the world. Plasencia got his supply from Dr. Mark Chavez, 55, a San Diego doctor who ran a ketamine clinic and diverted product on the side. So, legit drugs going to a legit doctor that is doing illegitimate work and sending it to third parties. And that's how the web of legitimacy somehow devolves into the black market. You see, two licensed physicians, both fully aware of what they were enabling, both of whom will later surrender their medical licenses. Now, Dr. P finally pulls back. Whether owing to moral reasons or legal reasons, Perry's circle has to find a new source. Enter Eric Fleming, 56, of Hawthorne, California, Perry's acquaintance, who serves now as the middleman connecting them to Jasveen Sangha. The logistics are clean. Sangha sells to Fleming. Fleming delivers to Iwamasa. Iwamasa injects Perry. Each handoff creates a layer of distance between the source and the needle. In October 2023, the month Perry will die, Sangha and Fleming sell him 51 vials of ketamine for $6,000 cash. Sangha sends a sample first, a single unbranded glass vial with a blue liquid, as a quality check. Once it passes, she delivers approximately 50 more. And in one batch of 20 vials, she throws in ketamine-laced lollipops as a bonus. Let that detail sit with you. Lollipops, a free gift with a purchase from a dealer to a man whose addiction is, in the prosecution's own words, spiraling out of control. It is a Saturday, October 28th, 2023. Kenneth Iwamasa, Perry's live-in assistant, injects him with ketamine at least 3 times over the course of a single day. The ketamine is from Sangha's supply. Each injection pushes the drug deeper into a body that is already carrying the accumulated load of weeks of escalating use. A body that has coronary artery disease, that has buprenorphine in the system, that has survived things most bodies would not survive. Ivamasa is not a doctor. He's not even a nurse. He's a PA who has been injecting his employer with a powerful anesthetic because his employer asked him to, because every other person in this chain has either refused to regulate it or actively profited from the refusal. Sometime that afternoon, Perry gets into the hot tub at his Pacific Palisades home. The combination of ketamine's dissociative effects and the hot water does what it does quietly. There is no dramatic collapse, no cry for help. Perry simply does not get out. He is found face down in the water. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner issues the autopsy on December 15th. Cause of death, the acute effects of ketamine. Contributing factors, buprenorphine, drowning, coronary artery disease. He was just 54 years old. The news detonates globally. Perry's face is on every screen. Tributes pour in from co-stars, from fans who grew up with Chandler Bing, from people who never met him but felt like they knew him, people like me. And in North Hollywood, Jasveen Sangha picks up her phone and calls Eric Fleming on Signal. The conversation is about one thing: distance and how to create it. She updates her Signal settings to automatically delete their messages. She gives Fleming a direct instruction: delete all our messages. 2 days later, Fleming, who is apparently a strategist as well as a drug courier, leaves her a voicemail and follows it with a text that prosecutors will eventually read aloud in a federal courtroom. Quote, "Please call. Got more info and want to bounce ideas off of you. I am 90% sure everyone is protected. I never dealt with Perry, only his assistant, so the assistant was the enabler. Also, they are doing a 3-month tox screening. Does K stay in your system or is it immediately flushed out?" End quote. The actor was just 2 days dead, but his middleman is doing math on his exposure, workshopping a legal defense via text message, asking whether the drug that killed Chandler Bing can be traced back through the chain. The answer, as he would discover over the next 18 months, is yes. Yes, it can. The investigation takes months. In March 2024, agents raid the apartment and find the stash house. Sangha is arrested, released on a $100,000 bond. But in August, she is re-indicted alongside 4 co-defendants specifically for Perry's death. And this time, bail is revoked. She has been in federal custody since. And the defendants fall one by one. Dr. Chavez pleads guilty in October 2024, Fleming and Ivamasa in August 2024, Plasencia in July 2025. And on September 3rd, 2025, Sangha becomes the last to plead, admitting to 5 federal charges, including the biggest one: distribution of ketamine resulting in death. Maximum sentence of 65 years. Chavez gets probation and 8 months home detention. Plasencia, Dr. P, he gets 30 months. Fleming and Ivamasa await sentencing. And on April 8th, 2026, just a month ago, Jasveen Sangha stands in an LA federal courtroom for the final act. The gallery is split down the middle. On one side, you see Sangha's family and supporters who have written the court what the judge calls countless letters describing her as a compassionate and selfless woman. On the other side, Perry's family. His mother, Suzanne Morrison. His stepfather, Keith Morrison. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should. Keith Morrison is the NBC Dateline correspondent, the man whose voice millions of Americans associate with true crime narration. He has spent his career telling the stories of other families' worst nightmare. And now he is sitting in a courtroom, not as a journalist, but as a grieving stepfather watching the sentencing of the woman who supplied the drugs that killed his boy. The irony is heavy and is palpable in that courtroom. Morrison tells the judge that he and Suzanne feel a daily grinding sadness and sorrow. He describes his stepson in the famous voice, except now it carries something it never carries on television. Quote, "There was a spark to that man I have never seen anywhere else. He was generous, kind, infuriating, and fabulous." And then the line that lands like a punch. He should have had another act. 2 more acts. Perry's stepmother Debbie tells Sangha she has caused pains for hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And then Kimberly McLaury stands up. She's here for her brother Cody, the 33-year-old personal trainer who died alone in his apartment in 2019 and whose name would never have surfaced if a more famous man hadn't died from the same supply 4 years later. Kimberly looks at the woman who ignored her text, the woman who Googled whether ketamine shows up on death certificates and kept selling anyway, and delivers one sentence that will outlive every other word spoken in that courtroom. Had you stopped selling ketamine when I texted you, we would not be here today. And then Jasveen stands up at the podium. She's emotional. These were not mistakes, she tells the judge. They were horrible decisions that shattered people's lives. She says she wears her shame like a jacket. Her attorney, Mark Geragos, one of LA's most high-profile defense lawyers, the man who represented Michael Jackson and Colin Kaepernick, argues that, quote, pernicious addiction killed Perry, not his client Jasveen. Quote, there was nobody who was going to stop Mr. Perry from doing what he was going to do. He asks the judge only to award her 20 months as a punishment, only barely 2 years. And then the judge asks a fair question. Why does Sangha deserve so much more time than Eva Massa, the PA who physically injected Perry 3 times on the day he died? It is a genuine tension. Eva Massa did put the needle in him. Sangha filled the vial. Where does culpability begin and end in a chain like this?
I think that is a very fair question in detangling a web where someone did consciously make a decision as a consenting adult that led to their own death. Addiction is a complicated matter in that. I think there is something to be said of the fact that Jasveen profited from this endeavor and the personal assistant did not.
Right, that's such a good point.
And there is a certain power dynamic at play between the personal assistant 100%. And Perry, which doesn't exist between Sangha and Perry.
I mean, excellent points. And then there is also Cody's death.
Yeah, 100%.
Eva Massa is not involved in that.
He's not involved in that. Also, I wanted to know, is there something in her drug that is causing the death specifically? Is it laced with something?
It's actually really good ketamine. The quality of her drugs are really good. Ketamine is an anesthetic. So, anesthesiologist is a whole profession because we know that, old anesthetics like chloroform or the newer ones that so many true crime novels have been written on these kind of anesthetics because they're a slight titration issue can lead to death. I mean, it can lead to the heart stopping completely. And ketamine can stop your heart. You can easily overdose on ketamine.
This entire time, ever since he had died to now that I've been hearing about this case, I always thought it was laced with something that it shouldn't have been. I didn't know that it
was. If anything, it was
really
too
good.
pure.
That's crazy.
It was too pure. Judge Sherilyn Peace Garnett decides the punishment. It's not 20 months. It's 180 months. 15 years in federal prison, plus 3 years supervised release, nearly 5 times the combined prison time of the other defendants. To Sangha, you're going to have to show some epic resilience, is what the judge says. To Perry's family, there's no joy in this process. Maybe at the end of the day, you will feel a sense of justice. Outside the courthouse, the defendant's lawyer, Geragos, calls it absurd. He tells reporters, if you weren't in the courtroom, there's no way Jasveen is 5 times more culpable. And Keith Morrison, the Dateline voice, the man who has narrated hundreds of crime stories and is now living through one, says something about the woman who sold his stepson the drugs that killed him that most people in his position would never have the grace to offer. I feel bad for you. I don't hate you. The law is the law. And it's very clear. Somewhere in a federal prison, a woman whose grandparents came from Punjab to East London to Calabasas and built an empire out of fashion retail, whose yearbook quote was about whispers, whose Instagram was full of art and caviar, will begin counting the first of 5,465 days. Until then, stay safe, stay crazy, and stay desi.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.